Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the October 26, 2022 meeting of the Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority for Harrisburg. Unfortunately, neither Kathy nor Carla are able to be with us this afternoon. However, even without their participation, we are at a quorum, so let's proceed. Welcome. The first order of business is the approval of the minutes, which I hope everyone's had a chance to read and review. And I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the minutes for the monthly meeting of the ICA on September 28th, 2022. Second?
I'll second.
Wonderful. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. I have a brief chair report. And I'll start with just yesterday. I typed a memo to someone and said, you know, we may have to look at 2023 to set that meeting. Now that's pretty scary, right? But when you think about the holidays and everything else coming up, it's right around the corner. I was lucky enough last week to go to the dedication of the McCormick River Fund Library. And if you haven't been, I really encourage you. I know, Dan, I saw you across a crowded room. And I was really struck by Andy Ender's very last words. He said, Harrisburg deserves nice things. And that, of course, led to a rousing applause because we do. And hopefully we're on the precipice of lots of nice things coming. And relative to 2023, we look at how fast that's coming, and just to make sure that Dan and Maria feel overwhelmed, I was thinking about what the city faces over the course of the next 10 weeks. A new budget, discussions on the uses of the American Rescue Plan monies, final resolution on the FY21 audit, an economic development plan, closing out FY22, and that's outside of the day-to-day challenges. So that's sort of a prelude to acknowledging Dan, who's here today, and he is going to give us perhaps some more insight into all these challenges that face you. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, the budget portion Maria is gonna give. I don't want to lose my voice here. I got 3 more meetings tonight. But I'll start and I'll just go through order of some of them that I have written down here already. Economic development plan. We took a little bit longer reviewing it as it relates to the comprehensive plan that was done. Those final edits, working with Jeff Knight and his shop, are being done. That's something that is forthcoming very, very soon. We're excited. It looks like Harrisburg deserves nice things, Audrey. It's nice. Okay, and it's going to speak to the city as a whole. I'm really, really happy with the work of Jason and Denise on that. So that's something that as soon as that is given a thumbs up for distribution, I will make sure that Jeff gets it out to everybody here for your review. As it relates to ARPA, one of the things council had asked us to do was to get the guidelines, stipulations, and all of the applications done ahead of time. In certain areas, that's proven to be quite a task, but we are moving along that at some point in November, they will all be ready and good to go in public documents at that point. Hoping that if council were to approve that, we can go live on those sort of things at the beginning of the year. Depending on if there are changes that they are going to require to the programming themselves, they might set a few things back. But just working things out. It's not like the state or federal government where the legislation passes that give you the authority to build out the program. We're kind of doing it backwards. Our councils, what we're doing is building it out for them to react to, which has created its own challenges, but I think it's actually been a pretty good exercise, especially for our administrative leadership team to kind of think through all the things where things can go wrong. That's something that's coming. really soon. The other thing is as it relates to labor negotiations, IAF firefighters union. We're in the middle of those negotiations. We are right now hoping to have those wrapped up by year's end. The other more pressing one that happened was as part of the whole CSA program that happened with the Harrisburg Bureau of Police. We were required to open up the union language for the FOP contract. And within that, trying to correct some of the issues that we're having as it relates to staffing. We built in to that contract newer union wage increases that city council read for the first time in the record this past yesterday. They're going to be discussed next week. We're comfortable and confident where they're at. Our actuary, actually, they came in at a more than comfortable amount as it relates to the pension obligation. Worried if I was correct. If I'm correct, the actuary number actually came back negative as it related to what they had anticipated it to be. But it begins to put them into a place where they're competitive, not completely on par with the neighboring communities and cities, but they're getting competitive, which will go a long way to helping address a lot of the staffing needs that we have, where there are just certain types of proactive policing work that become struggle to get done. So that's going to help us with that. The two big things I wanted to make mention is there was $47 million of statewide grant money that was left over from CDBG CARES Act that they created a Mad Dash program out of DCD to apply for this money. And where the city, we were hoping for $1 million or $2 million. I said, let's push for 5 and phone calls and see what we can do to help. We actually ended up with 13 million of the state's $47 million allotment, all geared towards improvement on park space. This is a huge
That's all from DCD, thank you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Donuts, Enrique's office.
It's a huge balance of, when we look at what our capital needs are, you're not only just looking at the capital needs of, roads and everything, you're looking at this as a place for the community to go, for kids to be at. We wanted to make sure what we put out there, stuff we can get done. Dave Baker's shop is confident it's going to get done in the time that it needs to get done, and it's going to be safe. It's going to be a good place for kids to go. We don't want exposed metal. We don't want wood that's splitting. We want to make sure these parks are not only something that our kids can go to, but everybody can go to. We want to make sure that they have full sensory experience for children with special needs. We want to make sure that they are top notch. And thanks to the state and this award, it's going to put us for once ahead of the curve as it relates to parks. All of our deferred maintenance costs that are going for parks. So we're happy to announce that literally just happened in the last 24 hours. It's going to be a huge thing. And that gets into the last thing that I wanted to mention before Marita goes into budget. Part of our pathway to a better future and being able to tackle the needs that we have, the deferred maintenance and a lot of those capital expenditures, is doing as well as we can to get the debt paid off as it relates to AMBAC. Right now, we're sitting on just over $20 million in AMBAC debt that needs to get paid off, and I've provided the members here just some of the documents we have as it relates to that debt. Looking at in front of council legislation that would fully pay it off at some point in November or December, depending on how that process goes. Just in next year alone would save the city $963,000 in interest. It's $2,600 a day. The current AMBAC debt plus the city in interest. That will obviously go down over time, but throughout the rest of the decade, it's just over $4 million in interest savings. It's something that the mayor had made a strong commitment with, along with the controller and the treasurer, to do as best as we could with our finances this year, with getting everything done, and look towards the end of this year, look toward getting this paid off. And we're at the point right now where, with the controller's projections, we can get all of this paid off and start next year at over the 17% minimum requirements we have in reserve. We would have about $15 million. And that is on the conservative side for the controller's office. We would have $15 million left over. The controller's office also thinks there's a scenario where it could be upwards to $20 million left over, which would push us far over the 17% threshold that we would like to stick to. This is something that has been monitored on an almost daily basis by a number of different people, and I have to give a lot of kudos and respect to the collaboration we've had in City Hall as it relates to this. It's not an everyday occurrence where you're talking about these sort of things. But what it will end up doing for our budget, which Marita can get into, is give us a runway to be able to have a revenue line far above the expenditure line, where that difference can then be invested back into the community, which is, I think, one of the most important things that we have to do is get towards making those investments. That's about all I have for this. Marita, you can outline some of the budget proposals, and then I can interject from here on out. And as it stands right now, getting this debt paid off, what we're looking at doing is spending the next few years running very, very good budgets. So when the time comes that we do have major investments that need to be made throughout the city, everything willing, will be able to go out into the debt market and do it in the right way. But right now, what we want to do is put our best foot forward and have a few good years where we run things well, and we start to begin to make those investments to show that Harrisburg is open for business and that we do deserve nice things. So, Marita.
Yes, our budget team, we've been working diligently to prepare the general fund budget. I would say we're about 75% of the way through preparing the expenditure side of the general fund. We're still finalizing some of the capital purchases that will be designated as part of the general fund. And we'll then have to focus on the revenue side, which our colleagues in the accounting office and the controller's office are going to lend a hand on helping us with the financial forecast for next year. If you recall, last year they were a big help. Both Brian and Bill really gave us kind of a leg up that we wouldn't have had with the 3-week period we had to put the budget together. So I've been spending some time on the other funds, give Tim a break, the budget manager. So I've been looking at the capital projects fund, the state liquid fuel fund. We have like 4 or 5 real tiny funds that are for police, fire, parks and rec, mostly through donations. You know, the CPAs would kind of like us to eliminate those smaller funds just to kind of merge them into the general fund, but we still aren't there yet, but perhaps sometime in the future we could do that. But for now, we're set to be on time for delivering the budget to council on the 22nd, certainly to Dan and the mayor prior to that. We don't have an exact date yet. We're working on that, but we're close. I think we're in about as good a shape as we've been in many years in terms of the status of the budget. We're, you know, a good way through the general fund, which is our monster, as you know. Neighborhood services fund is actually being done in commensurate with the general fund because there's pieces in the general fund and there's pieces in the neighborhood services fund. So we had to do the 2 of them together. So that's nearly finished as well. And then we're still waiting on the IIFF contract finalization, so we're kind of holding on those numbers. We have the general idea of where we're headed with that, so we're probably gonna be doing those in the next, I don't know, 5 to 10 days. We'll be doing that projection and we'll run that past Dan and see, because he's been taking the lion's share of helping us with the calculations for some of these contract lion's share. He's done it pretty much on his own because he's got this little calculator up here. It just operates with that one that he holds in his hand. So I'm grateful to Dan for that, because it's really taken the big burden off of me, so I could focus on the budget and the audit. And we do have, not to switch gears, but we do have a candidate for the financial analyst. I know I've told you that before, but unfortunately, the young lady who we had, 4 weeks ago ended up declining the position. We're in an employees market, so employees are kind of driving the bus. I know, Jeff, you're feeling that same pain, but we do have a secondary candidate who's excellent as well. And we're kind of working through HR to see if we can get her cleared for employment. So we're hopeful, because poor Brian and Alicia are pulling their hair out, because there's only 2 people in the accounting office and there's usually 4. So they've been working diligently to try to keep things moving smoothly, despite that Brian's there probably every weekend trying to make that smoothly. But we do have Leander, who's been a big help, and Rebecca. We wouldn't have 13 million. I hate to brag, but I don't think we'd have 13 million without her due diligence, her intellect, and her savviness in terms of applying for that unique funding that DCD was able to make available to Commonwealth entities, municipalities, I should say. So we're very fortunate. I think we have an excellent staff. I've been able to inherit a very good staff: procurement office, grant office, accounting office, budget office. Everyone's really doing a superb job. And if we can get these other pieces of all in place, as Dan just explained, it'll be the first time in a long time that would be debt free and would be able to hold our head up high and say, this is the direction the city's going to go. And it's a good, healthy, fiscally healthy direction, I believe.
Thank you both. I hope you'll entertain some questions, because we may have some. I'll let my colleagues start.
Sure. So the handback repayment, and you said that reduces the probable obligation next year by just under $1 million.
Next year's savings on interest alone
Yeah.
is $963,123.78. If we were to stay on the schedule with the twice a year payments we make, that would be $1.9 million twice a year. But the debt that would be taken on over that time would be $4,028,555.
Thank you, because I thought I had seen that number closer to 2 million someplace. In some things I was reading, so that okay, I understand that now. And then the fund balance we're left with is still a little bit above the 17%.
Yes.
Running that against our usual revenue, our budgeted revenue.
Yes, and Charlie and Bill ran a number of different sets of numbers, and this was what they came up with on the conservative side. And they double checked it off with what Brian Hutchins had also came up with. So, on the conservative side, it would leave us, obviously, these are estimates, but projected on December 31st at $14,883,916.
Now, and forgive me, I didn't get a chance to go back and compare against the 5-year plan that we've been working through. But my presumption then is that the lack of need for payment in the future means a faster rebuild on that reserve.
Free cash flow is going to be mostly put towards cash balance in the accounts, and then some things will be going towards deferred maintenance we have in capital projects. I don't know if that's a 50-50 split or what it would be, but the ultimate goal is to build that reserve back up and start investing in projects, realizing that we can't fund through cash and general fund everything we have in the city. But start making some of those investments.
Well, you had suggested in previous meetings too, that, once we build reserve, reduce debt overhead, we can access the debt market a little bit better to do some of the larger deferred capital projects as well.
We're not doing everything we can do today to build the profile to get the best rate. You know, we're not doing that. So this is a component. This is a component of it because it's going to help show healthy and stronger budgets moving forward. And it will give us some flexibility as it relates to some of the smaller, and when I say smaller, I'm talking $1 million or $2 million or less capital projects, which there are quite a bit of them throughout the city.
Let's stay on AMVAC then. Did you have any comments about that?
Yeah, a couple comments. On the AMVAC ones, I did pull up the 5-year plan. I was curious as well. I have not fully memorized the contents of the plan, like maybe
Thank
Dan or
goodness.
Rita have. So on the 5-year plan, it does already propose to pay off this forbearance liability this year. And they have a total of like $30 million going towards debt payments and early debt retirement. And it does show in the 5-year projections, the future budgets, without this debt service, this having been retired, but it does show pro forma debt service for new debt that the city would anticipate incurring for the capital projects. So that's good. We won't require any action on our part, and it won't obviously delay the ability for the city to repay and still stay in performance. There's just for where we're at now versus where we were back in June or something, these numbers were being first drafted. The fund balance at 14.8 million as of the latest. It's a little bit lower than the forecast in the 5-year plan. The 5-year plan was projecting a fund balance, including all the payoffs, at 17.9 million, and that was 21%, which is a fund balance as a percentage of expenses.
And that was part of the, let's take the more conservative approach towards this number. There are scenarios that they mapped out where it would be 18 to $20 million.
So yeah, as far as concerns the 5-year plan, I think that was pretty good. Weighing all the pros and cons, I think a lot of kudos and compliments to Dan, Rita, folks, mayor, folks at the city working on it.
I have a couple of questions. One is, I know we were trying to get a multiplier from AMVAC as far like we did the last time. And as I understand, they didn't give us anything.
Yeah, they said that we had our one trip to the well.
Well, it would have been nice if they told us we had only one trip to the well at that time. I worry a little bit, because I've been listening to Marita over the past 6 months when we're talking about all these increased costs that we're having. And, when you think about gas going up, the city having to absorb all of those things. So as I look at the October, November, December budget projections for those being averages of the last 3 years, where perhaps the budgets might have actually been a little less because of COVID slowing everything down. I worry a little bit that it might be an optimistic projection rather than a conservative projection. Because I also thought we had less than 77 budgeted for revenue this year. Did I miss that? I thought we were going with 70 or 72.
We've exceeded expectations.
Oh, that's great. Okay. So I think we need to, that would be great to know where that came from relative, and that it wasn't just the reallocation of the American Rescue Plan monies. You were going to give me a number? Yeah.
Yeah, the one from a few months ago from the 5-year plan, the mid-year, right before the mid-year report. I recall the history of the numbers. The revenue forecast then was for the year was 74.8 million, which is inclusive. So
Okay,
here at
So-
77.4 is the revenue item.
I mean, I'm all for paying off the debt, and I'm sure you guys have sliced and diced this to the nth degree. No one on the national front is saying it's gonna be rosy, and I don't know if there's any wisdom, given that we don't have, that there's no carrot they're offering us. Is it worth the trade-off to keep some more reserves to allow us flexibility if things go south?
We did run a set of numbers, including, paying off 10 million, 12 million. But it was hundreds of thousands of dollars, in interest just next year. And that was including still paying the whole thing off by the end of next year.
Right.
There was still a cost associated with that, we're fully believing that we're gonna be able to get, through the, pending, I guess it's pending at this point, recession. There was, National League of Cities did do their survey of city financial fiscal officers. And that the average thought was at most receipts were gonna be down 2 to 5% at most. And some of those taxes that a lot of these people were talking about going down, we don't have the authority to collect or don't even have within the Commonwealth. And then there's also a note within that report that said a lot of the ramifications typically do not hit municipal governments for years down the road. So we're very mindful of what those effects are. Marita's part of that team. We had accounting part of that, controller. It was about a dozen of us involved in that decision making, mapping out all those different scenarios.
And the expectation is to pay it off in December. I'm presuming, is it just to be uber conservative, is there a chance to revisit whether or not the revenue projections and the expense projections
There,
come in before you write the check and say, whoa, wait a minute?
we can do. This is authorizing money in the budget for us to do this.
Got it.
There's always the bottom falls out. There's always the whoa, we pump the brakes sort of thing. Just the legislative calendar and schedules forcing us to start it this early to do it. We are monitoring it. I was in a meeting today where we were monitoring, the money as it stands as of today. It's a weekly thing. So that's definitely something that we have talked about, is what happens if the revenue receipts were to just plummet. All of that's we're figuring all of that into the final equation of how we handle things. But as it stands right now, we could always follow this repayment schedule. There's nothing
Right.
keeping us from doing that. It's just those interest costs, we're looking at what the prices, you mentioned fuel, fleet vehicles, the modernization efforts we have to do, to go and go into the well and ask taxpayers to fund it. We're looking at, well, we could fund a lot of this just by saving interest costs, which is, I think, a lot of where the mayor and the treasurer and the controller are looking at this from, is it's just the money savings throughout the rest of this decade, and just interest alone can help fund some of those operational things that we just have to do.
Thank you. I appreciate that that there's a chance to pull this off if you see things not coming in quite.
Normally this late in the fiscal year for revenues, most of our revenues have been received, the major ones, so the final 2 months, we generally don't see a massive decline even under norm, and we're in a fairly reasonable economic environment right at this moment, so I don't anticipate the revenues taking any kind of dip. I would say we more likely would be meeting what we had budgeted or something close to that from a revenue standpoint.
Third quarter is usually the quarter where they drop the most. Where fourth quarter, their expenditures, it's either just a little bit below revenue or a little bit above.
other comments? I hope you realize this is, I'm sorry, this is part of our oversight responsibilities to ask these questions, so. Sorry, Rob.
Yeah, just a couple more questions and comments, and just since you've been addressing the topic, I think I would concur. I think it's important. I think we're hearing pretty good consensus from everybody at the table here about concern with the fund balance and making sure that it's prudent to pay it down, although achieving the payoff is very desirable. So between the budget exercise and the 5-year plan, which provides a benchmark, we should hopefully have a really good feeling about the decision, whichever way it goes, and hopefully the fund balance is in a good enough position to allow us to occur early. But if the decision is made that it's prudent to defer some or all of it, I think it sounds like we're all looking at the kind of the same criteria to evaluate that.
The controller's office also, highlighted that the year turns over, those revenues start out, they, historically speaking, begin the upward climb, like if you're talking of a roller coaster sort of things where it goes up and down based on quarters. So that should quickly replenish itself Q1 of next year. That's based off of their assessment. And Bill's got 20 years of known cash in, cash out within the city, and Ryan concurred with that.
Just to take that comment to the next step, one of the things that's in the 5-year plan, and Marita, our colleague, has talked a little bit about, is laying the groundwork for the city to re-enter credit markets. And I just want to just give a reminder that one of the steps that we'd have to do in order to do that is to sign off on the intergovernmental cooperation agreement. That's one of the things in the statute that enables the city not only to exit Act 47, but to enter into new financing, which I think is something that's a desirable thing for the city to do. So just a friendly reminder that keep that on the radar to accomplish in conjunction with your efforts to establish the credit rating and enter credit markets.
Neil Grover's all over that. Right now what we're looking at are those right steps and right moves to help build us to get to that point. So we're looked upon kindly. And we're not digging for any particular thing in our budget or operations side when we do go out and finally go into the markets.
I had a comment regarding the FOP contract that we heard about that was recently negotiated and being proposed for ratification. I believe one of the things that we're supposed to receive is just a 5-year projection of the effects of the contract as it relates to the 5-year plan. I was checking with Audrey before the meeting to see if we could look. We looked at this once before, and I believe that's something that we're supposed to. We are supposed to do as part of the contract. So lay that in front of you, and if you wouldn't mind, if you have an actuarial analysis already done, send that to us, and we can take a look at it next month and make sure that we just
Dave Killick, Brandon Brady, you can get the comparison, all of that information.
And then do that same exercise as we get the fire contract. Because I think, again, looking at expenses next year, that I'm sure is a big question mark. How much the wages have to increase. For
Yeah,
that.
we do have to get an actual study, I believe, for the IIFF. Once we get, but we do have the one for the FOP already, which we'd be happy to show.
And it will come, you'll look at it and it will say negative
It was very fair.
$100-some thousand.
for me. Thank you.
One, I mean, kudos for the $47 million. I think that's so exciting. So,
13.
oh, 13.
Still in this.
37, what was available.
Yeah, when you look at
So anyway,
this
so
size, the city of 50,000.
So you got more than 20%.
We
got
have
30 for almost
a great
30%.
staff of, I'll say, internal citizen lobbyists. And then we have an amazing grant writer. It all came together perfectly. The state has quite an interest in making sure we are investing money and are doing the right thing as it relates to so many of those things that have been deferred for 20+ years in the city, because it directly impacts everything. So we're happy with that, and we hope it's just the beginning.
Well, the priority ones in this report that we wanted to help fund with the
Yeah.
borrowing, most of them aren't on that $13 million list. So because I was just looking at it yesterday, almost everything is Parks and Rec, and some are facilities, but most of it's Parks and Rec in the priority one that we talked about possibly financing. So this could be kind of a gift from God that we don't have to do an immediate financing since we have this opportunity for this 13 million, which we never dreamed even 4 months ago that we would get, right? It's quite an accomplishment. So that does kind of buffer the pain in that we might have an option for supporting those capital needs that are in that priority one in your appendix there. And if you look at them, many of them will match up with the 13 million. Once we get everything finalized, we can show you that.
Well, thanks again to DCD for not putting it in the rainy day fund and instead saying mad dash. Quick.
It was an incredible process because we had 2 weeks.
Painful, but
I mean,
incredible.
we sat every department head down and said, here's the categories, what are your needs? And we went through everything and ranked them. We ranked it off the 5-year plan and what those needs were, and then we figured out what would be the best impact based off of what DCD was looking. That's how we got to the formula we got to, what was funded what, and you know, I'm almost getting almost a third of the money. Between a quarter and a third of the money for a city our size. It's an incredible thing. So we're really excited.
Only we could get the state to give us that much money just for being here and having so much tax.
Baby steps.
Baby steps, but maybe we can use that as leverage. Yes, sir.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, you may.
The current AMVAC debt that you hope to pay off by the end of the year, all things, the stars all has an APR interest rate currently of, I think it says 6.75%.
No, we renegotiated
Okay,
at
so-
5.
It's 5,
And then it goes back.
goes back up if you don't pay it off. So that
Yeah,
you can't go back
you can
20.
go back up, yeah,
So,
at the end of the
right.
negotiated.
So what you're
Great.
doing is you're taking advantage of the lower interest rate before
Right, pay it off. early.
pay it off early, you take advantage of the 5 before it starts accruing higher interest in the future.
Well, we also negotiated, well, I shouldn't say, the city negotiated the opportunity to do an early payoff, which I think was probably Charlie DeBruner's brilliant mind saying, you know, if we're gonna negotiate this, let's negotiate it to our advantage. So I'm sure there were a lot of other people involved in that decision and when this was negotiated, but the opportunity to pay it off early is just, it's, you know, it's a mastermind because it really does help us to if all the stars are aligned, as you say, move forward with substantial savings and the taxpayers aren't paying over $2,000 a day in interest, even at 5%.
Right, you
Yeah,
get to
so-
hold, you get to, it's a cost avoidance by avoiding that
Exactly.
interest payment that you
Right.
would otherwise, but you get to take full advantage of the low in the interest rate accumulation
That's correct.
by hitting the December target, if you are able to hit the December target.
Right.
The only other comment about the NDAC payoff is that obviously you are not yet have the ability to extend additional debt for capital projects. You hope to develop a credit rating. You hope to re-enter the credit market in the not too distant future, whatever that is. A lot of things have to happen to make that possible. But in the meantime, what you lack is the ability to borrow any other money if you have a worthwhile need to borrow money. So while this is not a great loan, it is obviously a loan. You're taking somewhat of a chance that you can weather a year or two or whatever it might be, 6 months if everything's perfect, before you could re-enter the debt marketplace. So hopefully in that period of time, the city won't need to incur any additional debts for any worthwhile capital investment in that short period of time. At some point, you need to be able, there is no municipality that does not incur some debt at some point for some worthwhile purpose, but you are currently prohibited from doing that. Hopefully that prohibition comes to an end.
Well, the fact that we've got the 13 million, some of that is built in.
Absolutely.
That is capital, not all, but a lot of those priority one items will match up on that 13 million. So that's like I said, sort of a blessing in disguise that we weren't anticipating a week ago when we were examining this. We didn't know we'd be getting money to help us with potential capital.
Sure.
Not all of it is capital, some of it is, but it almost equals the 15 million in the priority one projects that are all parks and Rec.
And, we can also look at the city-owned bridges. The county has an open offer to come in, and with the money this frees up in just interest alone, we can go and fund to get, the county just had a release on the county-owned bridges. They've offered to extend the olive branch that way to get city-owned bridges in the same fashion, and it's nickels on the dollar what our cost would be in comparison with the county chips in elsewhere. So I think if we're smart in how we manage the revenue or the money that this frees up in the budget, I think we're in a good spot to strategically look at how we can do those sorts of things.
That was my only point.
Yeah, it's just a wild question. What is the market for municipal borrowing right now?
It's in a terrible place at the moment.
Is it more than 5?
No, that's probably not. That's probably about for a AA rated. As opposed to, it's almost impossible in Pennsylvania to be AAA rated as municipality because of the tax structure. So most of your better communities are AA rated B, or AA2. So there's some, there's probably in the 5% range, but municipal borrowing has slowed tremendously as the Fed has raised interest rates this year. There was a mad dash in the first quarter of 2022 to refinance and borrow money, and then it sort of hit a wall after the first quarter, and by this right where it is right now, there's very little new debt unless it's necessary debt. And obviously there are projects that need to get funded. There are always municipalities that need to borrow. So there are always going to be municipal bonds being sold, no matter how high the interest rates are. But things are high right
If I may also bear in mind that the schedule of repayment under the existing impact forbearance liability is something like 6 years.
Right.
So it's not just the rate being 5%, it's the rate of amortization for repayment is extremely burdensome. So yes, if the city were to have the same amount of debt under a longer term 30-year bond issue, it wouldn't be $3.9 million a year in debt service. It'd be a lot lower. So the debt service burden is significant given the very accelerated repayment timeline.
Still there. Just wanted to point out the downside. There really is more upside for them, for the city to extinguish this debt and then see where they're at. See what the land is going forward, then we just don't move this down and make it forward.
It's great. I mean, the fact that the conversation is about proactive decision-making regarding managing the city's debt just shows you what a great place to be in for the city versus like 4 or 5 years ago when a conversation like this wasn't even on anybody's radar.
Any other comments?
I was one of the few actors there in that meeting 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I do have a budget question. I don't know if we're mixing.
We can mix apples and
Okay.
oranges.
My understanding from what you said is that you believe you'll be transmitting the proposed budget to city council on the 22nd of November. Is that?
That's required by law.
Okay, so this is the first time we've had our relationship with the ICA and the current administration for a normal annual budget. But there is actually a role that the ICA plays in the budget process as well.
As does DCD.
As is, so just more for the chair, you might want to think about meeting schedule. We actually are scheduled to meet in November on the 16th,
Right.
which is before the budget, and then we're not scheduled to meet until the third week in December, whatever that date is. But that actually is not conducive for the Harrisburg budget schedule. So even if we meet on the 16th, you might consider another meeting in between or moving one of the other meetings, because you have to have some kind of public review and advice or consent of that 2023 budget, And you have a very short period of time in which to squeeze that in as a board.
Thank you.
So just try to plan ahead.
I like your oversight there. That is important. I did just look, November 30th happens to be a Wednesday. So we could push it a week later.
We have some public hearings that evening.
Okay,
Just so you know, the 29th, the 30th, the 1st, and then the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th, we're scheduled to have budget hearings at city council.
And we usually attend those in the
Yeah.
same group. We
I'm not saying we couldn't be here too, but then we'd have to rush over. it.
But they're also very, in the past, those hearings have been very helpful for the ICA board, because you have presentations, we answer questions from city council, and that provides additional budgetary information to the ICA board. So it's actually good to attend those and to get your handouts and get
Or watch.
your dialogue with city council or watch them, and then sort of to gather at the end of those hearings, but before the budget's approved. So that window, that'd be somewhere in the second week of December, if my math is correct. Maybe that Wednesday, not the third week in December, but the second week in December. Because you will need to coalesce your thoughts as a board on the 23 budget.
I mean, we could have a very abbreviated meeting on the 30th, even if the city couldn't attend to share our thoughts. It would mean that we would then have, and then if we moved up the December meeting, we would be able, so it'd be within 2 weeks.
That would actually be very good if the board is available to meet on November 30th, and then what's the second Wednesday?
The 14th.
14th. So the 30th and the 14th, they should meet. When is the city council scheduled, Mary, to vote on the final budget if everything proceeds as planned? Is that before the 14th or after the 14th of December?
They could, I think they could vote as, I'm not sure if the 13th is a work session or legislative meeting.
13th.
So it's possible it might pass on the 13th.
It could, that depends on if it's a work session or it's a.
We have, that's always the
Yeah.
problem.
Probably more likely the 20th, but it could pass on the 13th, depending on what
So,
the
no,
council.
I guess
Chair would want to.
it's not relevant, but you could gather on the 14th, knowing what happened on the 13th, and then follow it up with ICA board action the next night on the 14th. It's perfectly okay. Still before the end of the month, which is the most important. So it's the,
There's 3 of us here, so there are 3 calendars we can check.
it's up to you all to make this.
Uh,
I'm not with that.
Would you be all right with moving to the 30th and the 14th? Or
Instead of the 16th, instead of
the 16th and the 21st? Ah. I mean, I think that, we could also just hold the 14th
sure, we have the room.
and then keep the 21st on and only gather if they happen to pass it.
On the 21st.
We do need some notice to advertise.
Okay,
So, and we advertise on the Sunday before, so you basically need to go by the Thursday before you meet, that you're having. the meeting. Sorry. It gets complicated. With the-
I can say it out loud, just to help remind myself what our role would be here and how we can help the city with this is. And what we would do is we would attend the budget, we would read the budget, attend as many hearings as we could, and then ultimately try and prepare a letter that confers and says that it meets the 5-year plan. So, so I think what we would want to do is have a meeting at some point in the window after it's introduced, just so we could make sure we had a meeting to do so. And then we could authorize the concurrence letter to go out and just verify that we reviewed it and it projects a balanced budget for the year in accordance with the 5-year plan. That would be satisfactory for us. That gives the city the confidence when they're voting to adopt the budget, that it's all clear as far as Act 124 is concerned. That would be our formal, our sort of formal role in assisting the city in adopting the budget. So I think for just saying it out loud, see if you agree, but I suppose it would just really be important to make sure we have, most important thing would be to have one meeting sometime in that window when the budget has been introduced before it's adopted, to make sure we had a chance to review it
So
and authorize.
So the 30th, I think,
you keep the 14th and you keep the, what's the December meeting, I'm sorry.
the December meeting's now the 21st, so maybe leave it,
Leave the 14th and the 21st, but add the 30th.
we'll move the 16th of November to the 30th of November and keep December 21st.
Okay.
Which is currently scheduled, but we can always. At the
Change it.
30th, change it, but let's not, okay,
The city's having, some of our colleagues are going to be actually at the budget hearing, something to be mindful of. Maybe the time of the meeting is early enough that we're still able to convene, and understanding of our, greatest colleague Marita's busy preparing for hearings that she might not be able to attend, and that's
right,
understood. So that's
okay,
I would only ask to assist us with our process, as has been done in the past, if you could just, in addition to the draft budget, if you could provide us your presentations. Basically, our questions will be the same as city council, I'm sure, or similar. So you generally do a PowerPoint when you first, unveil it, a PowerPoint to answer whatever questions they gave up. If you can just feed that to me and I can feed it to the board, that would provide them with sufficient information to make a decision on supporting the budget.
I think that's what we did last.
You
year.
did, I'm just like, the timely sharing of information gets it done. That's.
The problem is, we were typing those up while the meetings were still.
And then you send it to me afterwards and we're
I got
good.
you that a few times for not being on time for that, but it was a tight.
And if they have typos, that's okay.
Well, it was mostly waiting for the departments to get us the stuff we needed in timely fashion.
Hopefully it'll go smoother this year, but budget is fairly smooth.
It's gotta be smoother than last year, I did.
thank you.
Thank you very much. I
And
appreciate
thank
it.
you for highlighting that issue, it's important to get it, there, and it's much easier to resolve it when we're all here.
And then once it's finished, I have to submit it to Madra and Beverly for their review and approval that it meets the strong plan requirements. So that's usually just like a paragraph that you say you've reviewed it and you feel it. I mean, if you do, I'm not putting words in your mouth. I'm just saying that's what I had to do. I had to determine it. There were a couple times where I didn't feel comfortable saying that, particularly with the use of the fund balance that the previous mayor frequently used. I had to give some pushback. Not that it mattered. In the end, it still went through, but at least I went on record saying I was concerned about the use of the fund balance. You can look at my letters, they're still on record.
Any other points? Questions? If not, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is Jeffrey giving a summary of the state of the state.
State of the state is very good. So you have in front of you the October 26th financial report of the authority. You will note that our deposit from the Department of Community and Economic Development cleared our bank account on the 2nd of October. So we are fully funded, which is wonderful. Always our appreciation to DCED for their support of this endeavor as well. We had 5 other invoices and we finished the period with a healthy cash balance of $191,872.27. And we received $21.32 year to date in interest from FNB Bank.
Thank you. Is there any other business that we should be addressing? Okay, then I'll turn it over to you, Jeffrey.
Oh, you want to make note of
Oh.
your conversation with Matt Mazel?
Yes, that's an excellent point. Thank you, Dean. So I did have an excellent conversation with Matt on Monday, I believe it was this week. And we discussed the broadcast of these ICA board meetings. He was definitely open to the idea of putting our meetings back on channel 20 to satisfy the interest of the public and the goings on, as well as putting it on their YouTube channel, channel 20 YouTube channel. He did, however, suggest that from his years of broadcast production, that our Zoom meeting with our camera is probably actually superior in production format to the single camera shot from the side of the room that Channel 20 used to get when they would send a videographer to our meetings. He actually said that was more clunky and hard to see from the public's point of view. So one of the things he would like to consider is actually just taking our recording of this meeting and broadcasting that on Channel 20, as well as putting it on their YouTube channel. And I, of course, would be more than happy. It's a public video and we post it on YouTube generally the next day anyway. So if they would like to show our recordings, that would be up to the city. And he said he would speak to the mayor and get back to us within about a week and let us know if that would be the plan going forward. So I don't know if you all have any comments.
Maybe just for protect ourselves from liability, make sure there's a disclaimer, do not operate heavy machinery after watching this program.
I told him we don't get very many hits on YouTube. He might do better, but it does provide content for the channel. So they have something to run at 3 o'clock in the morning. Because they have to put something on at 3 o'clock in the morning, so it might as well be the ICA. But he will get back to us, so hopefully by our next meeting, we'll have a decision. But he was very open to the action.
Excellent. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Any other business? If not, we have a couple of citizens who are in it. Dan, do you want to introduce for the recording your coworker who has come with you today so that we can get him on camera?
Eric Truesdale is the deputy city clerk. He works for Michael Parker. So actually, the next two city council meetings, he's in charge. So as we go through AMBAC discussions, he's going to be thrown into the fire, having to deal with that. But we're really lucky to have him. He's a breath of fresh air and brings a lot of energy and experience. Actually comes from social services background. So, Jared, if you want to
Say a few words, Jared.
Yeah, I
Introduce
appreciate-
yourself.
Yes, sir. I appreciate being here. I noticed a few before. It was certainly a pleasurable experience and a lot was learned. So good to meet everyone.
Welcome.
Yes, welcome and always welcome to our meetings, as are any of the members of city staff. We love to meet them all and we like an audience, so feel free to join us at future meetings. And with that, we have two citizens in the audience. I don't know if either of you would like to introduce yourselves and ask questions.
I think we introduced ourselves enough over the last 3 years. So, yeah, Brian, are you gonna go first? All right, yeah, Brian, so I'm Eric Epstein from Rockford Capital. Disappointed in the response time on the right to know that we filed on August 31st. Really just not acceptable. We're 60 days. We're working with Neil to get a hard date for information, but we work with 15 different agencies. So I understand the city has hardships, but they're hopeful we can reconcile this week. But 60 days long time. I just want to point out that we still have the outstanding issues of OPEB and the neighborhood fund. And I'm not as optimistic as the city. We just spent a week with Teamsters. And that's 500 billion and serves. We have the benefit of going to 15 different agencies, and they don't necessarily share the same optimism. I'm just being frank. And their decisions impact employee contributions. Serves may be looking at a hit as high as 45% based on investments. Now they're a different kind of entity. They're driven off of their investments. Let me just say, part of my cynicism comes from the meeting we'll be going to tomorrow, which is the PUC. If you haven't been tracking that, your water rates are going to continue to rise, probably at a very substantial level. If you're not familiar with the DISC, you should look at it. The city should maybe be present at the PUC hearings. In addition, your generating cost is never going to go down again. That's your GSC cost. So we go to the PUC meetings and also litigate before the PUC. As a former school board member, I can tell you that I think that's going to be a substantial hit into the future. Broadband, by the way, if you guys have a really crack team out there for money, there's 287 million. That money has to be allocated within the next 60 days. I would go after that. I mean, that's a substantial chunk. It's on the timeline. We were just at the Turnpike last week. They put out 8 million for a separate broadband project. Try to bring to their mind the attention that this money's there and it's likely to increase. So it may not be a good idea. I don't know how you network or how you lobby, but the broadband authority is just new. And my sense is before Governor will exit the stage, that money will be allocated. Also at the PUC on the waterfront, there's a lot of consolidation. There's $1 billion proposal to eat a municipal water authority in Chester. So it's not something that I would advise doing, given after experience with the incinerator or the parking authority. But there's two water companies out there, and there's a pretty intense battle going on. I would also comment tomorrow, 3 PUC commissioners have been sworn in at the PUC. They'll be at the full complement for the first time in years. And Gladys is from Middletown. She's the chair. You all may want to have a discussion with her, because there's a lot of important stuff pending before that. Given our history of monitoring the city back to Mount Ashmore, I guess this doesn't need to be said, but I hope when you re-enter the credit market, you're not looking at the Royal Bank of Canada. Okay, I mean, but some of us who've been here for a long time, that, I don't know about Susquehanna advisors, but the hearings were brutal, and there was what I would think is a group thing. A lot of things were obvious that we're not tuned into. I think that's great news on the public access. Matt, has a lot of experience at Fox. I'm hoping you get a time that's not 3 in the morning. That is usually with the guy selling pillows, or that you can sign up to get your medical degree and truck driver's license from the same school. So I'm hoping that there's something more appreciable there. I'll just tell you, and I don't know if Brian has something here, is that it's pretty sobering sitting at these other meetings. And for their commitment, their preliminary state budget is being worked on now. The assumptions don't necessarily with the assumptions that I saw today. So that's not a criticism, but just an observation by Chair. It's looking lean elsewhere. The other little nugget I put in there, Ron and I were talking about that. After COVID, we try to factor that in all our projections. You have this bump, what's going to be permanent, what's going to be temporal. The highest savings level in a long time occurred last year. Only 4.5% of the Americans did have a savings account. I'm saying that because in bills being paid, people were able to draw down from COVID money. What I'm seeing is that there may be a couple of hits coming, especially with school boards, raising taxes, which just leads me to my final comment. We have the largest bus fleet in the county, central office school. Fuel is an issue. One of the things I suggest, again, if you're good at grants, is big money, the alternative fuel grants. There's a lot of them. If you want to partner with DEP, you may want to start refurbishing your fleet with the big money and with alternative energy grants. At any rate, I'm going to look at Brian. Do you have anything?
I want to think with this. I guess the only worry is just the surge meeting is everyone's downgrading, not just short term, not just 1 year, long term projections. The interest rates are going up. Everyone doesn't. So the typical, I get 7 to 7.5% return. So I'm looking at the minimum obligations. I guess are you factoring in? Because I know part of the reason you pay down debt for the your interest payment down. Are you factoring in long-term higher minimum obligations? Still like 10, 15 years down the road.
So Brian, just to understand, when the city adopts their minimum municipal obligations for their debt, the state requires the interest rate. It's not variable based on what the city thinks the pension is going to get. It's set by the state. The state tells the actuaries what to put in as the assumption, whether it's realistic or otherwise, which is a problem with our pension system, but that's the way it
No, I said you're right, and I understand that the double A bond rating is a function of the restriction that exists in Pennsylvania. I guess I'm still trying to figure out, you guys have UAL numbers.
No, we do not.
I mean,
The city is not currently listed with any. Current. It will be, but it is not current. Unlisted at the moment. This is the category. So.
No, I won't say no to this support.
Gentlemen, feel free to email me if you have any questions. I'm more than happy to answer them. And if I'm not the right person, I'll at least tell you who the right person is. All right? My pleasure.
Right, you guys take your electric bill.
We did. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you to DCD for being here. We have 2 of our favorite representatives. Do you have any questions for us? Not at this time.
No questions. I just want to say, to the Harrisburg City Administration, you guys are doing a great job with, and so I want to commend you in your efforts to get your debt paid down and get out of the red. That's, you know, and I know it's taken from where you were before, and so hopefully it's going to help you to continue to be in a good position financially. I want to commend the ICA for doing their due diligence to make sure that those efforts are not going to doing their oversight to make sure that your efforts are not going to put you back in financial distress. So DCD is always happy that we're able to provide any type of financial reward to municipalities, the cities, that so that they can make the communities better for the people that live there. And so that $13 million that you guys got from CDT, we look forward to being at the groundbreaking of you know, these parks or grand reopening with that's what it is. So
Thank you.
We look forward to having you. And
Turn it back over to the chair.
Anything in the last minute, because I'm gonna ask for a motion to adjourn. If one person wants it, we're out of here. Okay, we're out of here.
All right, 5:07 PM.
Thank you very much to everyone.